What are we discussing on today's Locked on Dimebacks podcast? Will Jordan Lawlar crack the D-backs opening day roster? Comparing Eduardo Rodriguez to Madison Bumgarner, and where does the D-backs rotation rank in the NL West?
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Dimebacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? Always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. To see more of my work, please follow me on Twitter at CareerThomas24 for my personal account, or look up Locked on Diamondbacks, both Twitter, Instagram for the podcast handle. Thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. Now, in today's podcast, we're going to be talking about where the D-backs rotation ranks in the NL West, comparing Madison Bumgarner to Eduardo Rodriguez, and will Jordan Lawlar crack the opening day roster? But did you know today's episode is brought to you by Game Time? Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Game Time, best place for last-minute seats. But now let's get into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. Let's talk about, will Jordan Lawlar be on the D-backs opening day roster? Because I asked this question to you guys because it surely feels like the D-backs want him on the roster. It feels like they want him there opening day. And a lot of that feeling is because Mike Hazen has been pretty open and candid about wanting Jordan Lawlar to get opportunities. He said in a presser this week, like, he wants to get Jordan Lawlar as many opportunities as possible at the start of the 2024 season. So if your GM is openly and candidly talking about how we want to get you playing time to begin the season, then I have to believe the D-backs organization, and probably Torey Lovullo too, the manager, feels similar to Jordan Lawlar. Have the D-backs made moves where they could go in a different direction as an opening day backup shortstop? Yeah, they have Kevin Newman and Jace Peterson, even got some guys in the minor leagues if you want to do that. But Jordan Lawlar comes into the camp this year already on the 40-man roster and as the top prospect in the D-backs organization. I would not be surprised at all if he made the opening day roster as the backup shortstop. I believe there's three good reasons why he should win the backup shortstop job. The first one is the precedent has already been set for Jordan Lawlar. The second reason is Lawlar is way more talented than any other candidates vying for the backup shortstop. The third reason is he doesn't need to be great immediately. Now, let me talk about that first reason. The precedent has already been set. We saw this with Corbin Carroll back in 2022. The D-backs called up Corbin Carroll very late in the 2022 season, gave him a little cup of coffee, gave him a taste of the big leagues late in the year. And the very next season, that was Corbin Carroll's full season campaign where he played with the D-backs from opening day to the final game of the World Series. And he, of course, Corbin Carroll made a fantastic impact for the D-backs, but that's what we're going to potentially see with Jordan Lawlar if the D-backs go down the same path. The precedent has been set already where Corbin Carroll, you call him up late one season, and then the very next season, full year rookie campaign. That could be like what Jordan Lawlar just did with the D-backs at the end of 2023. We got called up late in the year, and then he can win the backup shortstop job, be there from opening day, and just get some decent playing time under his belt this year. Because If he does win the backup shortstop job, then honestly, I think Jordan Lawlar will sneakily play a lot of games for the D-backs this year. I think he will actually platoon a lot with Geraldo Perdomo and play a lot against left-handed pitchers. I think he would actually play enough where he could be considered for a rookie of the year if he plays well, of course. So, despite Lawlar being on the younger side in terms of his development, Carroll was only a few months older than him when he debuted. Like, Carroll was 21 years old when he debuted in 2022. Jordan Lawlar was 20 years old. But I just don't think the age should even matter right now. Like, if you're good enough to be on the major league level and go against major league pitchers, then you should be playing with the D-backs. And Corbin Carroll was someone that was definitely ready to go against major league pitching. If the D-backs feel the same about Jordan Lawlar, maybe they don't think he's ready enough to be everyday 162 shortstop, but if they think he's better than what the other candidates that they currently have on the major league roster, and he's better than just staying in AAA or staying in AA and going against that competition, then why not put Jordan Lawlar on the opening day roster? And to be honest, I think Carroll showed that sometimes the best ways to develop is to be thrown into the fire. I think we also saw the best of Brandon Pfaadt last year when he was under duress, right? He started the season slow, but as the season went on, as the games got tougher, as the games meant more, Brandon Pfaadt got better. Corbin Carroll did have a second half swoon, but he picked it up right in time for the stretch run to get into the postseason. And of course, those first couple rounds of the playoffs, Corbin Carroll was very good as well. So for Jordan Lawlar, maybe throwing him into the fire right now is the best way for him to develop. On to the second reason. Lawlar, just straight up more talented than any of the other backup shortstop candidates. Like, outside of a Blaze Alexander, I don't want anything to do with, all due respect, with the Kevin Newmans or the Jace Petersons of the world. Like, those guys just aren't dynamic enough for me. At least a guy like Blaze Alexander, if he won the backup shortstop job, I do think that would be interesting. His bat to ball skills seem pretty good. Like, his bat seems like could be major league ready right now. It seems like he has good contact skills, decent speed, has been able to add more pop to his bat, and has a really good glove. Like, I think Blaze Alexander actually makes sense as a backup shortstop if you don't want to give it to Jordan Lawlar. But the other guys, I think they're just Jags. The Newmans and the Petersons, like, they can't hit. They don't have power. Peterson has a little bit of speed. Newman has none. They're not good defense players. They're not good platoon players. Like, I don't know what those guys bring to the table that would actually help this D-backs team get back to the postseason. Like, what skill set do they bring where you're like, oh, that's actually valuable to this D-backs ball club? Like, I just don't think they have one. So why not just give it to Jordan Lawlar then? If he's better than any other candidates, better than any of the other candidates he's going against. And the final reason why I would do it is because you don't need Jordan Lawlar to be great immediately. He can learn under the wing of another young shortstop in Geraldo Perdomo, who, let me fact check that again, all-star shortstop Geraldo Perdomo. So he would be learning under he would be learning under an all-star shortstop who's really not that much older than him, to be honest. And Jordan Lawlar would also be in an environment that has an expectation of winning. A winning environment, I think, is so important for a player's development. The D-backs already have a super deep lineup with a great mix of young talent and veterans. It would be great if Jordan Lawlar, rookie year, was very Carroll-esque, if he immediately ran out the gates and was making flash plays on both offense and defense and smashing doubles and stealing 3 bags a game. Like, that would be very nice if he did that out the gates. But to be honest, the D-backs don't need him to. Like, all that success would be just the cherry on top of the D-backs season. The D-backs success this year as a team is not dependent on Jordan Lawlar. It is probably dependent on Corbin Carroll, but it is not dependent on Jordan Lawlar. Their lineup is deep enough where if Jordan Lawlar is a non-factor this year, it really doesn't play too much into the D-backs' long-term plans for this season. But what the D-backs do want to see from Jordan Lawlar this year, improvement in the bat, flash the star talent, and be a good defensive player and base runner. I think the last two, the defense, the base running part, I think that's something he can help out with the D-backs right now. And it's why I think Jordan Lawlar should be on the D-backs opening day roster. Now we'll talk a little bit Madison Bumgarner versus Eduardo Rodriguez comparisons, likes, dislikes. How are they same? How are they different? We'll talk about that in segment number 2. But if you are going to catch some D-back spring training games this spring training, the best place to buy your tickets, of course, is going to be Game Time, because Game Time is the best place for last minute tickets. See the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All in prices show your total upfront so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsor deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. With zone deals, you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for big time savings. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account or redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Let's discuss a little E-Rod versus Madbum, because I want to discuss if E-Rod can be everything that Madison Bumgarner wasn't, because that Madbum experience was not a good time. It is crazy to go back and look at the stats, which we'll talk about later in this segment. But Madbum expected to do a lot, and he ended up doing nothing for the D-backs. When both Madbum and E-Rod were signed, they had the same mission in hand: get the D-backs back to the playoffs. That's the mission. Well, that was the mission for Madbum. That is the current objective for Eduardo Rodriguez. We'll see if he could do it. Madbum, unfortunately, I mean, he was on the roster at some point last year, so I guess he did help the D-backs get to the postseason. It is kind of crazy. If the D-backs won the World Series last year, Madbum would have gotten a World Series ring. And speaking of Madbum, of course, when just comparing him to Eduardo Rodriguez, both of them are coming in with similar mystiques and aura in terms of the expectations that D-backs fans are putting on them. Because Madbum coming in as this career workhorse, playoff scars, wounds all over his body, like he's the toughest guy on your ball club, in your clubhouse. This is a dude who is pitching until his arm is falling off. This is someone who will go start 3 times in a World Series. Like, he does not care. And when he was signed by the D-backs, we knew he wasn't the Madbum that we saw in the World Series, but we still thought he could be a frontline rotation arm. Maybe we didn't think he was a number 1 anymore, all bold, but we still thought he was a frontline rotation arm. If he was a number 2 pitcher, a really good number 2 pitcher for the D-backs, we would have been happy with the signing. E-Rod coming in, similar vibes. He's coming in to fill in a void in a World Series rotation. We saw this D-backs rotation pitch really well. Zach Allen struggled at times, a little bumpy, but he stepped up when we needed him the most. Merrill Kelly was dominant the whole time. Brandon Pfaadt was a revelation. But when you got to that game 4, that's when things got dicey, because, of course, the D-backs had to go with the opener and put a bullpen reliever guy out there to start the game, and that is not what you want to do in the postseason. So E-Rod, coming off an all-star season, supposed to slot right into that middle of the rotation. Again, supposed to be the D-backs number 3, but he does have the talent of a guy that could be a number 2 starter. So both of these guys have expectations, or had expectations, to perform when they were signed by the D-backs. But as we all know, Madbum did not meet those expectations and was absolutely horrendous for the D-backs. His career ERA with the D-backs over the course of 3.5 seasons, 5.24. a 5.23 ERA over how many innings pitched? 363 innings pitched. His whip, 1.379. His hits per nine, 9.5. And his strikeouts per nine, 6.8. And this past season, 2023, all-time horrendous for Madison Bumgarner. He had only 4 starts, 16.2 innings pitched, 19 earned runs over 16 innings pitched, 4 home runs allowed, a 2.4 whip. And if you want to see something crazy, his strikeout to walk percentage, negative 5.6%. I've never seen a negative. For his career, his strikeout to walk percentage, 16.8%. 2023, negative 5.6%, which is insane. And BABIP, batting average on balls in play, not very good for Madbum this past year. 350 BABIP allowed, 1081 OPS allowed, 347 average allowed. Like, the numbers were screaming that Madison Bumgarner was getting crushed by the D-backs this past year. And honestly, kudos to the D-backs for moving off Madbum this year because he was so bad for the team, and it was a very smart transaction to send him to the waiver wire because he was absolutely horrendous during his time with the D-backs. And those stats are what we are trying to avoid with Erod. But I think Madbum had way more red flags than Erod had when he was coming in. Despite both guys being 30 around the time of their signing with the D-backs, Madbum had 700 more innings pitched than an Erod. The arm on Madbum was just so much more worn out. I mean, when you look at his baseball reference, he had a lot of 200 innings pitched seasons. Like, credit to Madbum. The dude was a workhorse in his prime. And he also broke into the majors super early. 19 years old. Madbum was a teenager when he made his first pitch in Major League Baseball. That is something unheard of. Like, when Madbum is up for the Hall of Fame, honestly, his D-backs tenure really does hurt his Hall of Fame candidacy. But his time in San Fran sat between a 2.7 and like a 3.3 ERA year after year, 200 innings pitched typically, multiple World Series, top 5 Cy Young finishes, all-star appearances. Like, Madbum does have a case for the Hall of Fame. I do think he needed a couple good seasons in Arizona. Unfortunately, he did not get that, but his arm just way more worn down than an Erod's when he came to the D-backs because Madbum just such a workhorse throughout his career. And Erod has not exactly been that, which we'll talk about later. And then also, like I just said, all those postseason runs, like Madbum has been to multiple World Series. He was pitching till the final day multiple times. He was the kind of guy, like I said, he was getting 2 starts in a series, plus coming out the pen to also save it once or twice. So this guy, by the time the season was up, was maybe at 300, 250 innings pitched, whatever the number is. So the dude was a complete workhorse in his prime. And also, when we looked at the StatCast numbers for Madbum before he got to Arizona, his velocity was trending in the wrong direction. When compared to Erod, his velo on his fastball actually went up in 2023 as opposed to 2022. And I think it could go up again with Brent Strom now in the mix. Now, if you need a con against Erod, a red flag against him, his health history is also a bit concerning. Has only pitched at least 160 innings in a season one time in his career, which is not even that high of a number. So when talking about workhorses, Erod, in terms of innings pitched per start, he looks like a workhorse. He just never makes enough starts in a season. He also opted out of the 2020 season because of a health issue. But on the reverse side, you could say Erod's arm is fresher than most 30-year-olds because of the opt-out season, because of all the seasons he didn't pitch that deep into the year. His arm is maybe fresher than most 30-year-olds. So if Erod can replicate what he did in 2023 with the Detroit Tigers, which was a borderline all-star season, again, missed time because of injury, but 26 starts, 150 innings pitched, 3.3 ERA, 1.153 whip, 8.4 strikeouts per 9. Erod had himself a very, very good season this past year. And if he can replicate those 2023 numbers for the D-backs, He will be the missing piece in the rotation. And speaking of rotations, we're going to check in where the D-backs rotation ranks in the NL West. And if you think the D-backs have a rotation that could win the World Series in 2024, then why not go to FanDuel Sportsbook and place a little futures bet down on the D-backs World Series odds? Because get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot today. My favorite thing to do is the same game parlay whenever the Lakers are playing against a mediocre team. 80 over in points, 80 over in rebounds, Lakers money line, and that money line leg of the parlay has been hitting a lot more recently. So if you want to see that money hit your account, just visit FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. If you like the show, please follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for my personal account. Look up Locked On Diamondbacks on Twitter, Instagram for the podcast handle. And please hit subscribe to Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. We are close to 1,000 subscribers. Want to hit it before opening day, so please hit subscribe to Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. But now, let's talk about where this D-backs rotation ranks in the NL West, how it stacks up, because the D-backs, of course, have improved their rotation this offseason. It was already looking pretty good coming off last year because Brandon Pfaadt ended up turning into a revelation by the end of the year. But like as we discussed earlier on the pod, you can't have only 3 starters in the postseason. You need to be 4 deep, and the D-backs now have their 1 through 4, Gallen, Kelly, Pfaadt, and Erod, with Erod being the number 3, Pfaadt being the number 4. So let's talk about how that D-backs 1 through 4 stacks up against the rest of the NL West, because the D-backs were not the only ones making moves, upgrading, and also losing pieces in the rotation in the NL West this offseason. So I think it's easy to say. I think the Dodgers is definitely the most star-studded and deepest rotation when healthy. I don't think that's crazy at all to say. Dodgers fans, you guys can have it. Most star-studded, deepest rotation when healthy as well. But I definitely think the D-backs rotation can match the production 1 through 4 when comparing it against the Dodgers 1 through 4. And I honestly think the D-backs have one of the best 1 through 4 in all of Major League Baseball. And that will be, we'll see that case study this season. When comparing the D-backs rotation to the rest of the NL West, I mean, we'll start from the bottom and work our way up here. Sorry, Paul Holden of Locked On Rockies, but the Rockies rotation just currently doesn't match up with really any rotation in Major League Baseball. Maybe the Oakland A's, maybe like the Pittsburgh Pirates, but that Rockies rotation is gloomy right now. The Rockies lineup, I don't hate the Rockies lineup. I'm in on Nolan Jones, a little McMahon, a little Rogers, a little Blackman. The Rockies lineup, I think, could be solid. That rotation, though, is not good, Colorado. I'm sorry. D-backs rotation absolutely clears the Rockies rotation. Let's move up to the team that I think is going to finish 4th in the NL West, the San Francisco Giants. Listen, all Giants fans, I'm fine if you think Logan Webb is better than Zach Gallen. If you think Webb is better than any pitcher in the D-backs rotation, I'm fine if you say that. But you can't tell me it's the Grand Canyon is the difference. You can't tell me the Mexico Gulf Coast is the difference. Like, the difference is just maybe one hair on my chinny chin, because the margin between a Logan Webb and a Zach Gallen, if you do think Webb is better than Gallen, it is minimal at best. Those two are neck and neck with each other. So I won't argue if you're a Giants fan if you think Logan Webb is better than Gallen. I think Gallen is better than Webb, but I don't mind calling it a wash. But for the rest of the rotation, Robbie Ray, he's a nice little addition to the Giants rotation. The only problem is he just got moved to the 60-day injured list. He may not debut till like mid to late August, so Robbie Ray's not going to be a major factor for the Giants this year. And to be honest, I think the Giants are a team that should think about signing Montgomery or Blake Snell, because if you sign Montgomery or Snell, if you sign Montgomery or Snell, you can just be 500 by the time the trade deadline comes around. Then you add your Robbie Ray. Maybe you go out there and trade for a player, and then all of a sudden you could be a second half team. I think the Giants should give major consideration to bringing in one of those really good starters still out there on the open market. Like, if you're the Giants, screw it. Bring on Blake Snell, Jordan Montgomery. Bring on Cody Bellinger. Like, we always say the Giants don't have enough talent. Well, there's still a lot of talent out there on the market. Just go swoop them up for one-year deals if you're the San Francisco Giants. And just why not see what happens this year? And then next year, maybe decide to bring those guys back, or maybe you could even trade them at the deadline. That's what I would do if I'm the Giants GM. But the rest of the rotation after Webb can't really match up with the Kellys, the Erods, or even the Brandon Pfaadt of the world. Moving on to the San Diego Padres. I like Joe Musgrove a lot. I think he's someone to watch out for as a trade candidate moving forward. He's only about $20 million a year till 2027, so he's locked up. You don't got to worry about that. And at this point, $20 million a year, like Erod's getting $20 million a year. I think Joe Musgrove is better than Erod. All these pitchers over the next few years are probably going to get, if you're good, if you're like a 2 or 3, you're probably going to get rotation salary starting at 17, 18, $20 million, because that's what we saw this past offseason. Guys like Frankie Montas getting like 17, 18 a year. So if Joe Musgrove is on 20 a year till 2027, like, that's a super bargain for how talented he is. I think the Padres might need to move him because the rest of the rotation has big question marks in it. And if you're not good, why not trade Joe Musgrove and getting some more prospects back if you're the Padres, who quietly have a ton of young prospects on the bubble that could be called up pretty soon, and a lot of highly touted prospects. So if I'm the Padres, I actually wouldn't mind blowing it up a little bit. Keep Tatis, probably keep Machado, and then everyone else, even the Bogarts of the world, the Yu Darvishes of the world, trade them all, because there's so many young, talented players on the rise with the Padres. I would like to make that team a lot younger and see what that thing looks like. But getting back to the rotation, Darvish, he's turning 38 this summer. Like, how much more does he have left in the tank? I think that's a big question. Then after Darvish and Joe Musgrove, like, the rest of the rotation might just be the Juan Soto pieces. And I kind of like some of the pieces that they got in the Juan Soto deal, but I don't know if they're ready to be everyday starting rotation guys in the middle of the rotation. Like, we'll see about that. So Padres definitely does not match up against the D-backs in terms of rotation. So that, of course, just leaves the Dodgers. And again, I'm fine saying the Dodgers have the best rotation, but I definitely think the D-backs, pound for pound, can match production-wise with the Dodgers. Again, I think there's some inherent risk with the Dodgers rotation. Yamamoto, I think, will be a stud and will be fine. But can he be a little slow adjusting to Major League Baseball in year one? I don't think that's a crazy take to have. Tyler Glasnow, will he ever stay healthy? I don't think that's a crazy take to have. Never pitched more than 120 innings pitched in a season in his career. Clayton Kershaw, Walker Buehler, when do they return? They're not starting the season with the Dodgers in their rotation. Will the Bobby Millers of the world experience a sophomore slump? I don't know. I think the Dodgers rotation is the most talented, but I also think it has way more risk than the D-backs rotation. So for now, I'll say the D-backs have the second best rotation in the division, but I also think the D-backs have a rotation built for postseason success. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. Thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.